Hey everyone, I'm John, and today we're talking about how to become financially free with the path. The path is really about a plan and having a strategy to become financially free by the time you retire. The first rule is having a clearly defined plan. Failure of not having a plan is a failure of planning itself. The first thing you're going to want to do is to create a net worth statement. You can do this really simply by adding up all your assets and subtracting all your liabilities. That's going to be your net worth. Assets are everything that you own today, and your liabilities are things that you owe to others. Your second step is that you should know your financial goals, or at least start to research into your financial goals. This is going to help you develop a financial plan. How are you going to invest? How much money are you going to be saving? When do you want to retire? A lot of different questions that you need to answer. Step 3 is to run a projection. You can run a projection online with any retirement calculator, pen and paper, whatever it might be. This will just help you understand how much you'll need by the time you retire. Step 4 is to determine if you need to adjust that goal. For example, you might want to plan to have some type of surplus, which is more or less just overshooting your goal. But the key fact is that you should know where you sit financially today. You should know what assets are bringing you wealth, and you should also know what assets are taking away wealth. You should also know your time frame. How long will it take you to reach financial freedom? Step 5 is to create a customized portfolio. Your portfolio is a collection of all of your different assets, and you want to make sure that you have a solid portfolio so that your financial goals will be met in the time frame that you allot. These are things like making sure that you never miss an employer match, trying to max out your Roth IRAs after you max out your 401ks, making sure that you tackle all of your high interest debt just so that you can have this snowball effect for all your other debts. The second rule is to build this portfolio that aligns with your goal. Many questions you might ask yourself are, how much should I put in stocks? How many should I put in bonds? How many of those stocks should be in large companies? How many should be in tech companies? Should it all be in the US? Should I invest in the foreign markets as well? Your third rule is to revisit this plan often, at least once a year. And last but not least, the ultimate rule, which is don't mess it up. When it comes down to investing, habit is your friend. Being able to set aside money and invest it in the market and forget about it is going to be your best friend. You also have risk management, which is basically the concept of how susceptible are you to losing your money. This could be a catastrophic loss, basically a stock market crashes or your investments go sour. You also have things that happen outside of the market. You might have a death in the family, you might have a house that catches on fire. And so this is where insurance comes into play, really ensuring you that when these things happen, you're still going to be able to reach your financial goals. You can customize your insurance based off of your needs. And we're not going to talk too much about insurance, but it is something to keep in mind. And you can customize your insurance to meet your needs and your portfolio's needs. And while we talk about risk in the market, let's talk about just personal risk. Now, at any point in our lives, we can get sick. We can pass away. And so we also need to be able to plan for our estate and also our assets for the next generation. So you'll want to come up with what's known as an estate plan. There's 4 main steps in an estate plan. First off is you should plan for incapacity, which is more or less if you cannot act on your own behalf, who can do that for you and make the decisions for you. Number 2 is planning your asset allocations. Where are your assets going to go, to whom, and being able to establish new things like trusts for the next generation of your family. The third thing is avoiding probate, which is mostly just proving a will. And if you had a will already done beforehand, you can avoid probate pretty easily. And the fourth thing is that you want to minimize your estate taxes as much as possible. So this is where you choose your beneficiaries, and your will is basically who will obtain your assets when you pass away. So not only expressing your wishes on paper will help you legally, it also will help avoid the probate process of proving that will. You will also choose an executor who will execute your will on your behalf and distribute the property and assets as needed. And if you have children, you might need to choose a guardian, just somebody who you really trust. So when you determine how your assets will be distributed, you can either provide it directly to the beneficiary or you can do what's known as a trust. And a trust is really just a legal entity to hold your assets. And a trust can kind of serve as a means of time. So when the time is right to give those assets to the beneficiary, or when a certain condition might be met. Your estate tax is basically what's left over in your estate after you pass away. And you have this lifetime exemption, which is about $11 million. And you can reduce your estate below that means so that you actually don't get taxed on it. So if you want to become wealthy, you have to start acting wealthy. You first start with a clearly articulated vision, and then you push all your efforts towards executing upon that vision. So now that we've talked about mostly the depressing stuff, let's talk about the stock market and bonds. The first thing you have is the Dow Jones Industrial Index, and this is an index of 30 companies, and it'll give you kind of a snapshot of the last 100 years or so financially. You also have the S&P 500. This is the Standard & Poor index of the top 500 companies in the US. Now, these are just indexes that really help you gauge the market and where the market is trending towards. Your investment style may differ from other people. You might invest in small companies. You might invest in larger companies. And there is some truth that smaller company investments actually pay out more in the long run, but they're also a lot riskier than large companies. So let's talk about some basics that you need to know about the stock market. The first thing that you need to know about is what's known as a correction. And this is when the market drops about 10% or more. Now, if the market drops by more than 20%, you have what's known as a bear market or trending to be a bear market. Now, stock market corrections happen on an average of once a year. So you'll have to know when you need to ride those out. So most corrections average out to be about 13.5%, and they last for about 1 to 2 months. 1 out of 5 corrections will turn into a bear market. And an average decline of a bear market is about 33%. And a bear market will last anywhere between 8 to 24 months, so maybe 1 or 2 years. Now, what you can do as an investor in bear markets is you can save up money to buy at a discount. So to take advantage of a bear market, you basically need to know when to pull out your money and when to put your money back in. There's an element of risk here though, because the risk of being out of the market, it's far greater than being in the market. You can think of it in 3 different outcomes. The first thing is the market goes up. Yay, great. The second thing is that the market goes sideways. It kind of flatlines, but you still get dividends. The last is that it goes down, but it won't go down forever. So even though the market will go down, you're still receiving dividends on your investments. And eventually the market will rebound and start to climb. So you really lose nothing in terms of your investment if you just kind of forget about it. So let's talk about cash though. Cash has a very similar element. The first thing is that cash is probably not going to go up because you're not investing it in anything. You're not making any money. The second is that it can go sideways. You make a very small percent of interest rate in a checking or savings account, maybe like 0.06%. It's not significant enough to care. And number 3 is your cash could go down. There's money in a bank account and that bank needs to charge a fee so that they can hold your account open. Now let's talk about timing of the market. Now there's a misconception of perfectly timing the market. Some people can get lucky, but generally speaking, don't believe in perfect. Now you can't invest all of your money on the best possible day every single year. You can try, but you can't do it consistently. So the second best thing you can do is just invest the cash right away. For example, if you don't know anything about investing today, you can put your money in an S&P 500 index fund and you would have gains over the next 5, 10, maybe even 20 years. So as a sophisticated investor, you might be buying at the bottom of a bear market so that you can get more long-term returns. This is known as a discount on stocks. These investors might sell off their bonds and buy more stocks because they know that the market is on a rise. Now you need to be wary of different bias that you might have when investing in the first place. You might run into confirmation bias where you're reading articles of people telling you exactly what you want to hear in terms of investing. You also might have overconfidence, which is you believe that you can beat the market compared to the average investor. The third thing is illusion of control, where you believe that you actually control the market and how it actually acts on a day-to-day basis. The fourth thing you have is loss aversion, and this is basically avoiding a loss even though you can make a gain. You then have recency bias, which is something happened in the past recently, therefore it's going to happen in the future. Last but not least, you have negativity bias. You really got burnt in the past and that experience is going to stay with you forever. All right, enough about stocks, let's talk about bonds. When you purchase a bond is basically just saying that I loaned you money, you should pay me back. Those are usually to companies, governments, and many other places. So you have different types of bonds. When you loan to the government, you have a treasury bond. When you loan to a city, state, or county, it's a municipal bond. When you lend to a corporation or company, it's usually called a corporate bond. And when you lend money to a corporation that has to pay a high interest rate, it's known as a high yield bond, or also known as a junk bond. The important things you should know about bonds, though, is that bonds are rated based off of a score, and it's very similar to like a credit score. There are two scales for bonds, and they start with three letters: AAA, BBB. Now, any bond that's rated a BBB minus or above, those are going to be investment grade bonds, things that you want to buy. And any bond below that is going to be known as a junk bond. Now, bonds are far less riskier because you have that guarantee that you're going to be paid. Whereas a stock dividend is more discretionary. The company can decide at any moment to stop paying you a dividend. So bonds make sense if you really need to have stability in the next 2 to 7 years. They also provide you as kind of like cash or dry powder for when you need to buy at a discount. This is because bonds can be highly liquid and convert directly to cash. So let's talk back about stock dividends. Stock dividends usually pay every single quarter of the year. With stocks, historically, you'll get about a 9 to 10% return on your investments. So if you believe that the economy and the stock market will all be up in 10 years' time from now, long-term investment is great. In the short run, however, stocks are super unpredictable. Now, if stocks aren't your thing, you can also invest in real estate. Real estate provides you with what's known as an REIT, or a real estate investment trust. They usually provide you with a dividend income of maybe 2 times or 3 times of a stock would. This is because the rent income passes through all the investors in the trust. You can also invest in private equity, but it's a harder barrier to break into. So by definition, a good investment will generate cash flow. The key here, though, is that cash is flowing towards you. You are becoming more wealthy. Having a simple portfolio of publicly traded stocks, bonds, and real estate is going to set you on your path to financial freedom. And asset allocation is just how much you allocate towards each one of those different types of assets. This might be a distribution of 60% stocks, 30% bonds, 10% real estate. And your target allocation is basically your recipe for your financial freedom. It's your ideal blend of the investments that you're going to make to generate wealth. It'll be defined by your emotional capacity for risk and also the time block that you have for when you want to retire. Each year, you have an opportunity to rebalance your portfolio as you see fit. If you're feeling a bit riskier that year, you can rebalance into stocks. If you feel a little bit safer that year, you can rebalance into bonds. So here are 8 things that you should do right away after this video. 1. Build your financial plan outlining your goals. 2. Determine the asset allocation that will meet those goals for you. 3. Take a global approach to your portfolio. 4. Diversify so that you can reduce your risk in various companies or industries. 5. Consider working around your holdings that have taxable gains. 6. Determine what investments you should make in taxable versus non-taxable accounts. 7. Rebalance and tax harvest as much as possible. 8. Revisit all these steps every single year. So if you've done your job correctly, you won't have to worry about much risk. You'll just see your money grow over time. You'll have an allocation in place where that you can tax harvest and also rebalance at opportune moments. So we can't really control the stock market, we can't control what's happening in our lives, but we can control how we invest. So either you master your mind or it's going to master you. And if you want to truly build financial freedom, you have to take back your mind. You have to enjoy life, even if things do not go your way. And last but not least, you have to trust that life is happening for us, not to us. And that was how to become financially free with The Path. We'll see you next week.